our worldwide investigation into how nearly 200,000 Australians have been put at risk by the secrets and lies of the pharmaceutical giant Bayer. Tonight, families across Australia will finally learn the truth that Bayer wants kept out of court and out of the public eye. The truth about sudden heart attacks, unexplained strokes and massive kidney failures. The truth about thousands of mysterious deaths and about the drug Bayer discovered that was potentially lethal but continued to flood the Australian market with anyway. And as we'll reveal, there are still Australians out there who have no idea that they are still at risk, because once it gets into your system, this drug is a ticking time bomb. Here's Ross Coulthart.
You've come a long way to confront the heads of the company that you believe sold a dangerous drug.
Yes, they did.
That you believe killed your father.
Yep.
This is not good enough, Bayer. It's not good enough. Do any of you have a heart?
The real villains in this have to be Bayer. And I think this is simply because he was such an enormous money earner for them that the last thing that they wanted was for it to become known how big a risk a drug it was.
How come you can't talk about an intravenous drug that killed my dad? And I'll keep on talking over you, so stop!
The main question I wanted to know, how did it end up in Australia? How did my dad get injected with this drug? How is this possible? And how many other people have had this drug and it's just gone to the grave with them? It took many years to pinpoint what had happened. I've gone through everything.
And the only explanation for why your father died is?
The drug that they injected into him, Trasylol.
Made from the lung tissue of cows and used to stop excessive bleeding during surgery, Trasylol was the wonder drug for the German pharmaceutical giant Bayer.
At over $1,000 a dose, it was making them hundreds of millions of dollars a year. But there were problems Bayer kept secret. Evidence that Trasylol massively increased the risk of heart attack, kidney disease and stroke. Evidence that Trasylol was killing the patients it was meant to save.
At 30, David Lloyd was given Trasylol following surgery. The next morning, he was dead.
My mum absolutely thinks that he's the best, was the best man on the world. She's never met anybody like him. He's a skinny little pommy man, lots of nice little girls. He was a hard worker and he loved all of us kids.
Was he a healthy man?
Yes, yeah.
David came to Australia from England as a teenager. He became a carpenter, then met and married Jeanette. They settled in Melbourne and planned a big family.
Jeanette, tell me about David.
He was a rascal.
How can it feel this wrong?
Excellent carpenter, absolute tradesman. Even the furniture he built, we've still got. So,
was he a good dad?
He was a wonderful dad. And the children just worshipped him and found every excuse to be out there in his company, whether they should be or not.
From this moment, how can it feel this wrong?
By 1978, David and Jeanette had 4 children, and Jeanette was 6 months pregnant with their fifth.
Mum has a tape of him with his voice going, and he was just doing ABC or singing and, you know, carrying on with all us kids, but that's about all I got.
It takes a long time to get to that bloody bird.
In May that year, an accident would change their lives. David had gone out with 2 friends for some beers. On the way home, he was in the front passenger seat of his mate's Holden Monaro when it hit this Datsun.
As far as I know, he had a laceration on his forehead, which I believe was from the impact of the dashboard.
Ambulance officers mistakenly thought David had been thrown through the windscreen of the car. They suspected serious brain trauma, and he was taken to Royal Melbourne Hospital.
About 10:30, the hospital rang me and said he was in there. So I went in.
Was he conscious at the time?
He was already unconscious. The only last time I saw him, I heard the doors open, I turned around and I recognised his feet. And that was when they were taking him up to the theatre, so I didn't really get to see him.
While doctors treated his suspected brain injury, they initially missed a tear in his bowel. By the time it was discovered, he'd lost a lot of blood. So surgeons used Trasylol to control the bleeding. The operation to repair the tear was a success. But the next morning, inexplicably, 30-year-old David died from a heart attack.
Did you think that was unusual, that a man his age?
Absolutely, because he was so darn healthy and he'd never missed a day's work, sick or anything. I always did wonder why such a minor injury killed such a healthy young man.
We now know that one of the deadly side effects of Trasylol is heart attacks. But in 1978, Australia's drugs regulator, the TGA, didn't exist. So when Bayer flooded the market with Trasylol, there was no testing and virtually no supervision.
Surgeons at Australia's major hospitals, including Royal Melbourne, favoured Trasylol because it was so good at stopping bleeding, leading to successful outcomes from surgery. Or so it seemed. In reality, with no one monitoring its use, no one was piecing together a sinister pattern of deaths, all leading back to the same drug.
Did anybody ever explain to you why he'd suffered a heart attack?
No, there was no discussion at all. It was just, he's dead, get over it.
What did it do to your family?
Broke us apart. Absolutely broke us apart. And my older brother, hang on, at a sook. My older brother was made ward of the state within 5 years. And so I lost him too. They took our world away. Mum crumbled. So basically, losing Dad that day, we lost Mum too. Mum, back then, they said that she had manic depression. She was always crying and smashing up the house, and every week would have a new dinner set. She'd smash up the house. So I could tell that she was very angry. And there'd be times where she'd go to her room and put the music up loud and just scream, "Why did you do this to me, Dave? You know, why did you leave me?"
But you know now, or you believe that it was nothing to do with Dave.
And I think that's what I wanted, to prove he didn't leave because he wanted to leave. He left because he had no choice.
Jenny, who was 2 years old when her father died, grew up asking herself one nagging question. Why had he died so suddenly? As soon as she was old enough, she began looking for answers.
So then I went and got his medical records from the Royal Melbourne Hospital. I went through Freedom of Information.
How old were you when you did that?
17.
But the truth would take many more years to uncover. When Jenny left school, she trained to become a theatre nurse, hoping it would help her better understand what was contained in her father's medical notes. The more experience she got, the more she realised that even in 1978, her father's bowel surgery was a routine operation that should not have led to his death.
I haven't seen not one patient pass away from having that operation. And there should be no reason why they shouldn't have been able to do this successfully. Absolutely no reason.
So you kept on coming back to these notes and
Yes.
going, well, gee, why did my dad die?
Yeah. I still just couldn't put the pieces together. I just could not put them together of what actually made the heart stop. There has to be a reason why your heart stops. What was it?
Then in 2011, at the hospital where she worked, surgeon Paul Flanagan offered to look over the records Jenny had gathered. In amongst the pages, one word caught his eye. Jenny's dad had been given Trasylol.
They were using the Trasylol, as far as I understand it, to minimise blood loss.
Yeah.
But what it was causing was clotting.
33 years after her father's sudden heart attack, Jenny was now discovering the probable cause.
In my opinion, the most likely cause was a heart attack caused by a clot, which was caused by the Trasylol.
So the Trasylol caused the death?
Yes.
What Jenny would next begin to uncover was the decades-long cover-up by Bayer about the dangers of Trasylol.
Knowing what you know now, would you ever have used Trasylol on a patient?
Definitely not.
Yet as far back as the early 1980s, Bayer already knew there were potentially deadly side effects. In Cologne, their own hometown, university researchers alerted them to severe kidney damage in animals who'd been given the drug. Bayer ignored this warning, and another in 1992 when a trial in humans showed exactly the same side effects. Instead, they continued to aggressively market the drug.
Hundreds of thousands of Australians were exposed to the dangers of Trasylol, but just how many in total died because of it is unknown. But in America, one study put the death rate as high as 1,000 deaths a month.
So there are possibly many families across the world who have lost loved ones because of this drug.
Yes.
They have lost them because of things that have been put down to something else. They've died of a stroke, or they've had a heart attack, or they've had kidney failure. All of these things could well have happened without Trasylol. And as nobody knows these people had taken Trasylol in the first place, no one is going to blame Trasylol for them.
So they get away with it. It's like a crime with no victims, but it isn't a victimless crime.
Eric and Marcel Clark are English journalists who began investigating the victims of Trasylol after Eric became one of them. In October 2004, Eric had successful heart bypass surgery. Then, 5 months later, he suffered a stroke.
My GP was stunned, my cardiologist was stunned, the cardiac surgeon was stunned. Partly, or very largely, because only a few months before I'd had virtually every test known to mankind to see what kind of state I was in.
Searching for an answer, Eric asked for his hospital treatment notes.
And finally I found the only two references to Trasylol in the whole document. And as you can see, they are so tiny that, in fact, if I gave you these pages now without the markings, even though you knew it was on the pages, Trasylol, you'd have a job finding it.
Before you had Trasylol, what was your risk of stroke?
I was told that it was less than 1%.
After you'd had Trasylol, what was your risk of stroke?
181%.
So almost double the risk of a normal person.
Oh, yes, it's quite a large one.
Yet, like every Australian patient given Trasylol, Eric was never told that stroke is one of its side effects.
Bayer should actually have made known the risks of this.
In 2005, the same year he had his stroke, Bayer was rolling in money. predicting future Trasylol sales of $600 million a year.
You had this lopsided thing of marketing pushing the benefits and at the same time pushing behind the scenes the risks of it. And that is unethical and deadly.
Eight years ago, Bayer came here to testify to the US Food and Drug Administration. It's America's and indeed the world's most powerful drug regulator. Bayer was very worried because an independent study had been published suggesting that Trasylol was deadly. But Bayer persuaded the FDA to keep the drug on the market. Then it was revealed that Bayer had not told the full truth about what it really knew.
The cover-up always does them in. It's a public health issue. You need to report it.
What was the increased risk of death that was highlighted by that study?
Roughly 50%.
Jim Ronker is an American trial lawyer who now knows what Bayer long knew and tried to cover up. That Trasylol can kill. That Trasylol can maim.
We had some clients who the kidney failure was so bad that the kidneys failed completely and had to go on dialysis.
For the rest of their lives?
Yes, because unless you get a kidney transplant, there's no other answer.
In January 2006, it all began to unravel for Bayer. The New England Journal of Medicine published the largest study on Trasylol, over 5,000 patients. It found it doubles the risk of kidney failure, increases the risk of heart attack by 48%, of heart failure by 109%, and stroke by 181% compared to patients given alternative drugs.
But Bayer disputed the study and commissioned its own. Yet when it too confirmed the overwhelming evidence of the damage that Trasylol can cause, it was withheld from the American FDA. That damning information was not made public.
There's no doubt, is there, that Bayer knew full well there were dangerous side effects from their drug?
I don't think there's any doubt.
This is not good enough, Bayer. It's not good enough.
So because they weren't being upfront to the drugs regulator, people started dying.
I don't think they were upfront from the beginning. So people started dying from the beginning.
But Bayer didn't count on the author of their own study turning whistleblower and telling the FDA all he knew. Bayer tried to salvage the situation by blaming 2 employees for not releasing the study.
Bayer passed the buck to individuals and said it wasn't us, Gov, it was them, and fired them.
They sacrificed them?
Yes.
It was too late. 6 days after the whistleblower came clean, Bayer formally admitted to the FDA the existence of the evidence that had been withheld. In November 2007, Bayer finally took Trasylol off the market, but too late for countless thousands of families and the terrible harm that had been done to them.
In this case, I think it was murderous.
So it was all about money, profits.
It's typically always about money.
There's one thing about the drug that struck me, which is not today's thing, but Trasylol developed from a drug that was developed in the war in Germany. And obviously the Germans wanted a drug that was going to stop bleeding. And so they used a drug which was basically the same drug, and they gave it to Russian prisoners. One Russian prisoner had the drug, the next Russian prisoner didn't have the drug. And they stood them side by side, and they shot them both at the same time. And they waited to see which prisoner would stop bleeding first. It's not only an immoral drug, but its background is hardly the most salubrious.
The following is a health alert.
You may have received the drug Trasylol.
Bayer has never admitted liability, but in the US it has spent hundreds of millions of dollars settling case after case before they go to trial. Jim Ronker won a reported $20 million payout on behalf of just 50 families.
The fact that Bayer has settled the cases with you before they went to court means that there's no precedent on the books that makes a finding in the American courts that Bayer has done something wrong, doesn't it?
That's true. In addition, the documents don't become public.
You subpoenaed thousands and thousands of pages of documents from Bayer's own records, didn't you?
25 million pages.
When you saw what Bayer knew about the dangers of its own drug, Trasylol, were you surprised?
I was surprised by the depth of their knowledge.
In America, Bayer has paid out $250 million. In Australia, as far as we can find, not 1 cent. Nor has it made any public attempt to try to find the families of Australian victims, like Jeanette Lloyd, who was left a widow at 28.
When you saw the evidence pointing to this drug, Trasylol, were you surprised?
I was horrified. I went cold all over. I couldn't believe anyone would do that. I mean, you know, he was a human being. That really, really angered me.
How important is it for you to get an answer, to get an explanation? Why does it matter after 35 years?
For peace of mind for me and for the children, especially Jenny, being a nurse, because she knows she goes to work every day, and their first thing is first do no harm. And in this case, there was harm done, and then hidden, covered up.
Bayer is big. As one of the world's largest pharmaceutical companies, it's a massive employer. So much so that its factory here near Cologne is a large town all of its own.
You've come a long way to confront the heads of the company that you believe sold a dangerous drug.
Yes, they did.
That you believe killed your father.
Yep.
It's Bayer's annual general meeting. Under heavy security, airport scanners, guards, security cameras, Jenny Lloyd from Australia is about to bravely face the directors of Germany's giant pharmaceutical company, Bayer. 36 years ago, Jenny's father died after being given Trasylol.
Your whole life has gone in a particular direction because of what happened to your dad.
It has.
If you could talk to him now, what would you say to him?
I can't, can I? He's gone. He's gone a long time ago. He's missed every day by every one of us.
Bayer had refused all our requests for an interview with Sunday Night. But in Germany, shareholders are allowed to speak at their AGM, and a shareholder sympathetic to Jenny's plight made us their nominated proxy.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very, very much for the opportunity to speak to you and the members of the board of Bayer.
Bayer's rules say we have to address the board in German. So we've brought a translator.
Es geht die Droge Trasylol, die 1908.
And briefly, we're listened to. That is, until the mention of one word, Trasylol.
That there is a young woman here today, her name is Jenny Lloyd. Her father, David Lloyd, was given the drug Trasylol in 1978.
Bayer turns off the mic. But what they don't realise is that the next nominated speaker is Jenny Lloyd. And she's come too far and suffered too much to be silenced.
Here's the next speaker.
Yeah.
You want to read that?
Well, they're blocking us completely.
Well, I'm not moving. Will you listen to me? I am not moving. I am not going to move. I have flown so far for you to listen to me. This drug was not approved. It wasn't approved until 15 years after it was injected in my dad. Do you understand? I was only 2 years old. 5 children. Dad didn't see his last baby born. Listen to me. Have a heart.
Ich kann nur simultan übersetzen, das ist meine einzige Möglichkeit, die ich habe.
This young woman's father died, she believes, because of a drug that Bayer sold. And you should be ashamed of yourselves as shareholders for shutting it down.
Kicked off the podium, Jenny isn't budging, not without answers.
I don't care. Well, I'll sit here all night. Why should I move? How can they not have a heart?
I understand.
How come you talk about an intravenous drug that killed my dad? And I'll keep on talking over you, so stop! No.
Then another speaker offers her spot to Jenny, so she can once more address the board.
How did it end up in Australia?
Wie konnte es sein, dass dieses Medikament auf den Markt kam, ohne eigentlich eine Zulassung?
Not approved, and how many other people have
Wie
passed
viele andere
away?
Leute sind durch dieses Medikament gestorben?
And this has all been hidden.
Questions to which Bayer's chairman does not respond. But in the end, Jenny has the satisfaction of knowing she made her points and made them well.
I thank you for at least giving me a couple of minutes for you to listen to me.
Vielen Dank, dass Sie mir wenigstens 2 Minuten gegeben haben, um mir zuzuhören.
Thank you.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you.
Thank you. Then Bayer's security guards escort Jenny out.
I was there for a purpose, to let them know what they'd done. And they didn't want to listen, so I made them listen.
I think they know what you think now.
Yeah.
Have a look at that photo in your hand. Who's that?
My dad.
What do you think he would have thought about what you did?
I think he was there. I think he helped us. Oh, God.
That's a long time to get to that.
We've got a saying in our line of work that sometimes secrets have a way of bubbling to the surface.
Yeah.
Do you think this is a story that wanted to be told?
I really needed to be told. Yes, because I don't think it was only Dad affected by this drug. Dad cannot be the only one in Australia that has had this drug administered and not told about it. There must be many more.
Ross Coulthard with our special investigation. And one of the frightening aspects of Trasylol is that the drug can stay in your body for up to 10 years, meaning that the side effects can still strike within that time. If you've had surgery and now fear you may have been given it, or if you're worried that a loved one suffered or died as a result of Trasylol, then the first step is to obtain the hospital medical records. How you do that varies from state to state, so on our website you'll find an easy guide on who to apply to. You'll also find a statement from the Royal Melbourne Hospital where David Lloyd was treated, as well as Bayer's response to our requests for an interview and information. We've also posted our correspondence with Australia's Therapeutic Goods Administration, and if you wish to reach out to the TGA with your concerns or for further information, you can email them at info@tga.gov.au.